If you got your first gig, congratulations. And now it's time to prepare so you can do a great job and get your next gig. By gig, I mean you're getting paid to play. And it doesn't have to be a big venue. It could be something like a restaurant, a banquet, or a wedding. For the sake of this video, I'm picturing maybe a solo gig where I'm singing, playing guitar, and running my own sound equipment. That's a pretty small operation, but you can scale this up to duos, trios, and band gigs. Let's assume you've already booked the gig, you've signed the contract, worked out the pay, and all that stuff. The first thing you want to do is get good directions and find out how long it's going to take to get there. And make sure you factor in traffic, especially if you live in a busy area. Make sure you get a contact number in case of emergency. There's nothing worse than being stuck on the side of the road and you can't call your client and let them know why you're running late. Make sure you know who's going to give you the check, unless you're getting paid online. You don't want to be running around at the gig asking who has your money. If you can, visit the venue prior to your performance. It's not always possible to do this, but if you're able to, get in there about a week ahead of time, find the room you're going to be playing in, find the power outlets, figure out where you're going to be parking, see if there is a place you're supposed to load in or if you can just walk in through the front door. Is the gig indoors or outdoors? If it's outdoors, is the stage covered? Are you going to have some shade? Also, where's the power going to be? And for outdoor gigs, it's never a bad idea to bring a really long extension cable. Does the venue have a sound system? Probably not. And if it does, it's probably crappy enough you're going to want to bring your own equipment anyway, or at the very least bring your own mic and cables. If it does have a decent sound system, ask if there's a sound person. Probably not, but if there is, find out what time sound check is. Make up a set list even if you're just playing background music. And if somebody else is the band leader, get a set list from them and make sure you print it out. Of course, you want to practice your music so you can play it to the best of your ability, and you want to replicate the gig setting as much as you can. If you're going to be performing standing up, then practice standing up. And if you're going to be using effects pedals, practice using those pedals at home so you can dial in your settings and practice your pedal dance. And if you're using different pedals or settings for each song, make sure you write that information on your set list so you're not guessing at the gig. Now, you don't get to stop and fix a mistake when you're playing at the gig, so leading up to the performance, practice going through your set list, playing through everything, mistakes and all, so you get used to keeping on going if you make a mistake. Make sure you know how to operate your equipment. Have your amp settings dialed in as much as possible ahead of time. Same thing with pedals and anything else that affects your tone. If you're still learning how to use a mixer, experiment with it at home. The venue is the last place you want to try to figure out your sound equipment. Now, if you're new at this, there's going to be a certain amount of on-the-job training anyway, but learn as much as you can about your equipment before the gig. Make a list of the gear you're going to need. You might be surprised at the number of things you're going to need even for a solo gig. I've added a gear checklist PDF to my website. I'll leave a link for that in the description. Now, I'm not going to go over a complete list of the stuff you might need. That could be a whole nother video, but you want to make sure you're taking extras. Bring extra strings, extra cables, extra batteries, extra power strips, and also a DI, direct input, if you're going to be plugging your instrument directly into the sound system. Batteries. The day of the gig, make sure you check the battery levels on anything that runs on batteries, especially your guitar if it has an active pickup system. And pack as much of your gear as you can ahead of time. And if you have a small rig, aim for being able to load in and out in one trip. That's going to be very important, especially if your gig is in a sketchy part of town. So a good solid cart is going to be a great investment. At the gig, arrive early and be dressed for success. It's better to be overdressed than underdressed. And be aware that if you walk in with an instrument and some sound equipment, somebody's always going to be watching you. So be polite and professional all night. Whether you're running your own sound or you're lucky enough to have a sound person, make sure you arrive early enough to be ready for sound check. And this means arriving early enough to have your gear set up before sound check so it's ready to go. The last thing you want to do is waste the sound person's time. So figure out how much time you'll need to set up and then arrive at least 30 minutes before that so you can troubleshoot any problems that might come up. When it comes to setting up sound equipment, Murphy's Law is always in play, and it seems like things go wrong when you have the least amount of time to do anything about it. And speaking of sound check, remember that this is not a rehearsal, it's not a performance. This is a sound check. You're checking the overall volume, you're checking the mix, you're checking to make sure you're getting the tone you want. So save the performance for the performance. Also make sure you arrive in time to warm up and get your head in the game. If I'm singing at a gig, I'm going to do a vocal warm-up in the car on the way, and then at the venue I'm going to find a quiet corner somewhere and go through some scales and some guitar warm-ups to get my fingers going. Now this should go without saying, but be polite to the staff. If you have a good relationship with the staff, they'll take good care of you, especially if it's a recurring gig. And of course, be polite to the guests. If you don't take requests, find a polite way to say no. And if you do take requests, but you want to avoid that dance of, oh, I don't know that one, oh, I don't know that one either, have a list made up of the songs you do know, and then the guest can choose from that. And when someone compliments you, say thank you. This may seem like common sense, but if you're overcritical of yourself, like I tend to be, and somebody compliments you, one of my first responses is I want to say, oh, thanks, but man, I really messed up that, or did you hear that note I missed? And that just makes the customer feel bad. Don't do that. Just smile and say thank you. If you're playing a background gig, you want to err on the quiet side and have your amp positioned in such a way you can hear yourself. Now, if the crowd gets louder as the evening goes on, you can always turn up, but remember, you're providing some ambiance and you want to make sure that the customers can hold a conversation. If this is a restaurant or a bar or some other place where you can have a tip jar, set that tip jar out so people notice it and put some seed money in it. People are more likely to put money in the tip jar if there's already money in the tip jar. And put out some business cards next to the tip jar. I've gotten gigs from people who have taken my business card from a couple years back. So it's always a win if somebody picks up one of your cards, even if you don't hear from them right away. Don't stretch out your breaks, but don't cheat yourself on your breaks either. If you agree to 10-minute breaks, take all 10 minutes and then get right back to playing. If you start taking shorter breaks, especially for a recurring gig, the management is going to expect you to take shorter and shorter breaks. And when you do take a break, make sure your gear is safe. If you have to run to the bathroom, make sure somebody keeps an eye on your stuff. And when you're taking a longer break, try to stay within sight of your gear. If you're playing for a restaurant or a bar, you're probably going to be comped a meal and maybe some drinks. Don't be greedy. If I'm playing for a restaurant, I'm not going to order the steak. I'm going to order something mid to low priced on the menu. And if you get a free drink or two, wait until after to cash in on that. You might feel better after a few drinks, but trust me, you don't sound better. Start on time and end on time. Some customers will linger even when it's obvious that it's closing time. But if you stop right when you're supposed to, customers are more likely to realize that it's time to pack up and leave, and the staff will appreciate that. The gig's not over until you've packed up your gear and you're on your way home, so keep acting like the professional you are until you're in the car. Thank your client, thank your servers, thank your lucky stars that you just got paid to play for a couple hours. And if you're lucky, the person who's supposed to pay you will do so during the gig or right after. But if you do have to chase them down politely. Don't barge in on a conversation and embarrass them. Make sure you have all your gear before you head home. And on your way home, take a tally of what went well at the gig and what needs to be improved. And be sure to follow up. If this was a one-time gig like a wedding, send a thank you email to your client. And if you played for something that could be potentially recurring, like a bar or a restaurant, or you were hired through an event coordinator, contact the appropriate people, thank them, ask them to keep you in mind for future events. A lot of these tips might seem like common sense, but you might be surprised. And if it sounds like I'm describing a job, well, you're getting paid. One thing I did not cover in this video is stage fright. That's a whole nother topic. If you have issues with nerves, you might want to check out my stage fright video. I'll leave a link for that in the description. We covered a lot in a short time, so please leave a comment if I missed anything. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time with more guitar tips.